Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Terry Mottershead, the Executive Director of the Centre for Legal Innovation at the College of Law, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to this session on building a user-centred approach to innovation projects. With all of the ones that we're doing in this Focus on Innovation series, we've had the really good fortune of being able to ask and have accepted our invitations to people who are amazing thought leaders in this space and real gurus. And Melissa Lyon, who will be presenting today, definitely falls into that category. You can see that Mal is with Hive Legal. Also have the great pleasure of always being able to introduce her as a member of the advisory board of the Centre for Legal Innovation as well, and one of the Centre's distinguished fellows in a past life, Mel.
Yes.
Now completed. But really delighted to welcome you back. So with that having been said, Mel, and again, welcome back, and I'll hand over to you to kick us off. Thanks again.
Thank you, Terry. Fabulous to be here. And let's talk all about user-centred approaches to innovation projects, which I am obviously very excited about. It's something that I really love to focus on, and there is a reason, or a number of reasons for that. First of all, I want to tell you a bit about me and connect it to why I'm excited about what we're talking about today. I like to think of myself as a joiner of dots, a design thinker and an innovator. But really, one of the reasons why a user-centered approach has really has been important to me in terms of what I've done in my career and is very important to me now is the fact that, as well as practicing as a commercial litigator for many years in small law and big law and new law, I also was a business developer and continue to be a business developer, and to work with clients and really use client-centered or client-focused approaches as well. And then moving into the innovation space, I saw that really this idea of client focus, user-centered focus is a very broad concept, and I was able to tie together a lot of those things that I had found as a practicing lawyer, as a business developer, and as an innovator. And at the centre of all of these things is really looking at improving the experience for those people who are going to be using our services, our processes, our documents, or working together as a team in whatever we do. So that's why I'm really passionate about user-centered design and user-centered approaches, and why I really think that they work when you are embarking on innovation projects. Okay, that's enough about me. Let's have a talk about what we're going to cover today. So first of all, we're going to talk about what a user-centered approach actually means, because it means different things to different people. So we'll cover off on that. And then we'll look at why we need to do it. What are the benefits of it, and what do we get out of it when we're embarking on innovation projects? And then we're going to look at how you build a user-centered approach. And I've split that into a few different ways. So I want to look at mindsets. I know I talk a lot about mindsets, but I really think that mindsets are very important in what we do when we're looking at doing the right thing for the users, the people involved in your or who will eventually have the benefit of your innovation project. Also the processes as well. You won't be surprised to know that I'm going to focus more on the design thinking process than others, but there are other themes that we can use there. So we'll talk about the processes and how they can help you with a user-centered approach. And then some tools, some specific tools about how you can actually make sure that you're focusing on your user and gathering the information that you need. And then I'll answer some of your questions. So let's make a start. I'm going to start with this comic strip, and always love a visual. So I just give you a bit of time to take that in before I start to talk about it. So how many of us have had a fabulous idea? We get really excited. We think this is fabulous. I know what I'm going to do. I've already thought about it in my mind. It's going to look like this. We start off on the project, we find out that we have budgetary constraints, we don't have some of the skills that we needed, and it turns out being, okay, not what I dreamt of, but here it is, and that'll suffice. One of the missing links in that is, did we really think about what the user actually needed? And I love this comic because we can see like all the bells and whistles on the left-hand side, what we got to do, and then what the user actually needed, and they didn't need even what we produced. So really what we need to be doing is focusing on the user's needs when we're taking a user-centered approach. But there are a number of reasons why we actually don't do that. So let's have a think about those now. I'm going to pose this question to you and think about the last idea that you have or the last project that you started, and answer this question honestly. Do you fall in love with your ideas or your projects? Well, of course you do. I know I do. A number of times I've had a fabulous idea. I know I can do this. This will be really great. And this is what it looks like. And, you know, you go to bed at night and thinking about it and building it in your head. Wake up next day. Yes, that's perfect. We all fall in love with our own ideas, probably because they're our ideas that we've developed, and we want to make them work, and we can see them and visualize them. But the problem with that is that we've actually jumped to a solution way before we've had time to think about who it is that we're designing for and why we're designing in the way that we're going to design. So my challenge to everyone out there today is, don't fall in love with your ideas or your project. Actually love the problem. So sometimes when we think about problems, we just want to get rid of the problem. We want to jump to that solution, and we want to have that solution up and ready to go. And that's why often time for us is, especially when we're, I think in the legal ecosystem, we do want to get things done quickly, and there's that pressure on us to do that. But if we haven't loved the problem, we're not actually going to understand and I suppose delve into the problem enough to understand what the problem is all about, how it's affecting people, how it's stopping them from doing things, or how it's putting up barriers, which means that they're not actually going to use the process or the document or the solution that we're developing. So it really is that idea of actually loving the problem and not jumping to the solution. So how do we go about loving the problem? We need to understand the needs of the people with the problem. So we start off with, what is the problem? And we might find, and I think we should find, that we need to actually talk more about that. We need to think about it. We need to pull it apart. We need to love it, dissect it, work out what it is, and spend time doing that. And while we're doing that, we need to understand and gather information from the people who are in the middle of the problem, the people who have the problem, so that we can understand what their needs are. This woman obviously got a big need, got a lot of problems and needs some help in terms of that. If you can picture that response when you're putting something in front of someone to do, if it's a document they need to fill in, for example, or if it's a process they need to go through, or it's, you know, billing time and they need to do 100 bills. That's the sort of reaction that you need to really unpick and work out why it is that that person is having that reaction. A user-centered approach is putting the user at the center of the process. I know that seems a bit circular in a way, but that's what it is. It's actually thinking first up about the user and what they want, what you're trying to achieve for them. Now, the other thing that I'll say about this is that you often hear the terms end user, which is someone who uses, you know, at the end, has that benefit of using the process of the document or the service that you've designed. But what I will say here is that really you need to take time to work out who the users actually are. Who are they going to be in your project? At Hive, when we're looking at using a user-centered approach, which we often do using our design thinking framework, we take a broad approach to who those users are. So what I say to you here is, don't necessarily just think that it's going to be the end user in your innovation project. The users can also be those people that are involved in the process as well, not just the end user. So stakeholders, to use more of a legal term, they're users as well. An example that I'll use here is at the moment at Hive, we are reimagining how we communicate with our clients in terms of how we provide written advice and assistance. So when we first started off the project, we just assumed that we would be designing for our clients. But when we really looked at what the problems were and looked at the processes and talked to people, we realised that the users are also, from our perspective, our team who are taking the instructions in terms of communicating with our clients, who are then drafting the advice. And we realised that our project was broader than initially we thought that it was. So our users include our team and our clients, and we've gained feedback from them along the way as we continue to develop that project. So what I'd say is, work out who your users are, decide whether or not you're going to go broad, and you don't have to, but take that opportunity to pull in other users into the project if you have that. Okay, so that's broadly speaking what a user-centered approach is. What I want to talk now about, not surprisingly, is design thinking. So we're talking about users, we're talking about people and their experiences and their problems. So if we look now at IDEO's definition of design thinking, I think that it really fits with what we're talking about here. Design thinking has a human-centered core. It encourages organisations to focus on the people they're creating for, which leads to better products, services, and internal processes. So once again, users are people. So we've got to really focus on them when we're starting and continuing on our innovation projects. Okay, so why would we want to take a user-centered approach? In my view, it all comes down to improving the experience. And in many other sectors, for many years now, a lot of them have been using these terms that I've listed here: UX, user experience; CX, customer or client experience; EX, employee experience, very important part of this user-centered approach as well. And I've added in, I don't know, I just made this up, it might be a term, I don't know, but TX, teams experience, because I believe too that you can have an employee experience, but a team experience, and that idea of bringing together a multidisciplinary team and working together is a really important part of what you do as an innovator. So ensuring that your team has a good experience of working together. People have probably heard me say this before. I think when you wrap all of that up, and if you do this successfully, that experience, as having experience as the basis for what you're doing, then you end up with happy users and a happy team, a happy workplace as well. And it's all circular, and it really does make a difference. You're not going to get that great experience unless you've actually focused on your users and understood their problems and their needs as you're going through your project. Secondly, why would you do it? Because it gives you sustainable results. Quick fixes can be quick fixes in the short term, fantastic. But if you want sustainable results, if you want someone to continue to be involved in your process that you've developed, to continue to use you and use the services that you have, to continue to read the documents or be prepared to fill in the documents that you provide to them, then you need to provide them with a good experience. And that experience is going to mean that they want to continue to work with you. So it's sustainable if you get that user experience right from the start. It also provides you with solutions which are data-driven, because you spent the time at the start of your project understanding and gathering information about the users. And we'll talk about this a bit later on as well, because it provides you with the baselines that you have. And I know this series includes a session on metrics as well. So this provides you at the start of your project and throughout your project with that data that you can use for your metrics. Holistic solutions too. So if you're looking at what your users need and what their problems are, then you have an understanding very early on about what skills you need to bring into your innovation project, what people you need to draw in, what multidisciplines you need to draw in. And that eventually results in much more of a holistic solution, because you're actually not looking at a narrow problem. You're actually gathering information which will allow you to provide a much more holistic solution. And just the catch-all from me, it's better outcomes for all, because if you are, as I said before, if you're providing a really good experience for the end or the users, whoever's involved, then the people providing that service, product, process, or involved in it are going to have a much more enjoyable time as well. And so it really does align not just expectations but experiences, and that can only be a good thing. Okay, so the how. How do you build a user-centered approach? As I said before, I want to talk about mindsets, processes, and then some tools that we use and that can help you focus on that user-centered approach. Before we do that, though, I do want to actually think about what stops us. So self-reflection, I often talk about, and I talk about it from the point of view of, I suppose, my experience. And some of these things I still struggle with as well, and have to constantly remind myself not to do them. And I think it does come from our legally trained minds, or the fact that we've worked in the legal ecosystem for a long time, and there are very ingrained ways that we think, or we have been influenced to think in that way. So often what stops us taking a user-centered approach is that we're solutionists, and I talked a bit about that at the start. We'll jump to the solution, we're time poor, we need to fix it, and we'll just jump to that solution really quickly. Also, I don't think that in the legal profession we're very comfortable with ambiguity, which is, I don't know where to go next. I don't know what the next step will be, and I've got to sit and wait and make sure I know that information before I take the next step. So that ambiguity sometimes is difficult for us, but using a user-centered approach, and especially design thinking, you do have to really wait and live with the ambiguity and the uncertainty, and gather all the information you need before you start doing that design phase, or really putting into place what you're designing. I also think that siloed approaches in the legal ecosystem sometimes stop us from taking a user-centered approach and providing us with those holistic type services or processes that we were talking about before, and multidisciplinary approach, because we are used to saying HR does that, know-how does that, the corporate and M&A group do that, the litigation group do that, and not necessarily working across those silos to really look at it from the client's or the user's point of view, or the team's point of view, and breaking down those silos. This user-centered approach does actually do that, which I think is a very good thing for our legal ecosystem, and I want to see a lot more of it. So the mindsets, let's talk about those at a high level. Empathy is at the heart of design, and without that understanding of what others see, feel, and experience, design is a pointless task. Tim Brown from IDEO. I love that, and hopefully you're all reflecting on this poor girl in her high heels and the lovely guy at the end who shows her empathy by helping her out. The other reason I use this GIF is that really when we're thinking about the users of whatever we're designing and developing in our innovation projects, we really need to have empathy, and we need to walk in our users' shoes. We need to feel what it is like to have the problems that they have, in this case, very high heels and unable to walk in them. So empathy is something that we really need to embrace when we're taking a user-centered approach. And the way, and this is my very simple way of explaining how or what that means in terms of innovation. We need to use empathy to understand the user's real needs. And that comes down to understanding their problems and what matters to them. So if you ask that simple question, what matters to you, it's amazing the information you get from your users or your potential users, because they will start to throw ideas out, what matters to them. What matters to them might be the ease of use of the document, or that's intuitive, or that it's not long, or that it's not too complex, or that it's a visual rather than text. What matters to them might be that they can do it really quickly. So you start to build up from various users what actually matters to them when they're involved in the process or the service, gaining the service that you're providing to them. The second mindset that is really important is the collaboration piece. I love this quote by Cat Moon as well. That idea that we really need to collaborate to actually understand the problems of our users and then understand and dissect what matters to them, coming off the empathy piece. So the reason I have here Eliud Kipchoge, he is the first person to have ever run a marathon sub 2 hours, absolutely phenomenal. If you look around him, amazing team around him. That there were the guys who were helping him with the pace. You can see there that there's a green laser light. There was technology that allowed him to know how fast they needed to run to keep ahead of the time to get to the sub 2 hours. He would have had health professionals with him leading up to the event. All of those different disciplines and people who had helped to have him achieve what he needed to achieve. When we're looking at the user, let's say in this case, Eliud is the user, he had all these people around him working out what he needed to get to a successful outcome. That's what we need to think about when we're thinking about the user. It might not just be a legal solution that we're actually going to provide to this client. It could be that we need to pull in people from other professions who have a better understanding of areas of the problem that a client has. Technologists, all of those different skills that we want to assist or bring in to actually have a much more multidisciplinary approach and provide a holistic result for our clients or our end users. Now, there is something that we need to think about here when we're doing that. So I'll just give you a minute to look at this fabulous cartoon. I love this because I have seen this happen so often. Communication is essential and teamwork is essential when we're taking a user-centered approach, because everyone will have a different view of what they bring. So we talked about collaboration and multidisciplinary approaches. A multidisciplinary approach does not work if you're not working together and communicating what you bring to that. How many times we have projects and it starts in this area and they do their bit, and then it comes to another area, they do their bit. It changes along the way. Unless we're actually communicating and we all understand the user's needs, we're not going to get a great result. I think this is a perfect example of that, because all of those people are coming to the project with a different idea of what it is. What ties it together? The user's needs. And if we're understanding those, then we wouldn't get these disparate ideas and outcomes, where we would really be focusing on what the user needs and talking along the way. So processes, as I said, I want to concentrate here more on design thinking. There are obviously so many other processes that you can use for a user-centered approach. Totally agree that some of them will work for you. Design thinking is my thing. So the relevant parts of the design thinking process in terms of the user-centered approach are the empathy side of things, which we'll go into a bit more in a minute, where we're really looking at the user-centered, getting that information. But the user-centered approach isn't just at the start of a design process or an innovation project. It follows through the process as well. Empathy, really important. When you're actually defining the problem as well, because you need to have understood the problem so that you can really get to the nub of it. And that's where all of your user information is critical. I would also say that the ideation phase is crucial too, in terms of your user focus, because you can have people, you can have your users ideating and co-creating with you. And how fabulous is that, to actually be able to say, let's work on this together. Let's bring those skills together. You understand the problem. Let's work out how we can solve this together. So I really see that co-creation stage as being very important. And of course, the prototyping and the testing, the feedback and the iterating as well. So my point here is that the user-centered approach isn't just at the start. It's actually all the way through this process. So the user focus must be front and center of every part of this process. So I said that I'd talk about some tools that you could use, and I'm going to concentrate on a couple of areas of that process that we were just talking about. So how do we empathize? How do we gather that information? Well, there are a number of ways that we can do it. And what I will say to you here is take some time. In fact, it is well worth taking the time to think about how you're going to gather that information first. So the type of users that you're dealing with is important. I think the timing of your project is important. The type of information that you want to gather from your users is really important as well. There's no one right answer for what tool you use or what approach you use. I really think you have to work it out from the start. And I'd also say too that you don't need to use just one. You can use just one if that's going to work for you, but mix it up, use a few along the way, and I think you'll find there that you'll get a better breadth of information, and probably get some information that you wouldn't have got had you not used a mix of these different ways. So what are they? First of all, interview, talking to people, yes, asking people about their problems, what matters to them, what we talked about before. Interviewing sort of has that more formal sort of side of it, I suppose, when we think of it. But here it's a conversation more than an interview. It's actually getting people into a comfort zone where we're empathizing with them. So that term, empathy interviews or empathetic interviews, where we're actually getting them comfortable enough to talk to us about their problem. One of the things that we'll sometimes find is that you can ask people if they've got a problem, but they're not necessarily going to tell you because they might see that as a weakness, that they haven't actually been able to conquer that process, or that they don't understand the document, or that they're not actually, that they think they'll tell you what they think you want to hear. So when we're doing an empathetic interview or a user interview, we really need to make sure that people feel comfortable and that they are in a safe place and that they will share that information with you. Often when we're doing these interviews, it's really good to have the user and then two people interviewing them, because one person can ask the question and the other person can record the information. It's hard to, I think, get that real connection with people when you're asking them questions and writing them down and trying to gather that information at the same time. So here we really want to have that great bonding, I suppose you can say, where you're actually having someone have a conversation with you rather than bang, 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 asking questions. The other thing to think about here too is that having stories as a basis when you're questioning people is really, questioning sounds like criminal. when you're having those conversations, that getting them to tell stories is a really good way of actually asking them to elaborate more on things. So the last time that you did that, what happened? Tell me about that. What was your experience? What went well for you? What didn't go well for you? Why do you think that was the case? And asking those very open-ended conversations open-ended questions can really help with that. Storytelling and empathizing sometimes can be really good, to say, I had a similar experience and this is what I found. How did it work for you? So really building up that trust so you can get that extra information. Okay, so that's one tool that you can use to empathize. Another one is to observe. As I said before, often people won't tell you if they've got a problem because they're more likely to sort of tell you what they think you want to hear. So if you can observe what they're doing in the workplace, if you can see that they're cringing or throwing their hands up in the air, or like the lady right at the start of this, this is horrible, you can see that that's working. The other observations that you can make are simple ones. Are they actually using your service? If they're not using your service, then they're obviously not having a great experience. Are they, using the documents that you're developing and providing to them? Are they sidestepping the processes that you've developed? Have they worked out hacks for avoiding things that are really crucial or what you think are crucial in the process? So that observation piece is very important, and you can do that by observing, obviously, but you can also observe by looking at the data around usage as well. So it doesn't just have to be that line of sight, what am I seeing? It's also that analysis around usage and take up as well. The third tool, which is probably one that people jump to initially, that's why I wanted to start off with the interviews and then move to the observation side of it, because most people will say, we need to know what our users want, send out a survey. Not my first way of doing things, I must admit, but it is a good way of doing things, and it can be the only way that you gather your user information. Totally understand if that's the case. Once again, what I'm saying here is make sure that you are actually using a way to empathize that is going to work for your project and your users and you. But surveys can be so good in gathering that information for a couple of reasons. They give you a consistent type of information that's coming back to you, and they can be so easy. So we use a number of different ways at Hive for our user to gather our user information, including those that I've already spoken about. But we use chatbots. So we've developed a specific chatbot called Be Purposeful on the Joseph platform, which we use to gather user information for our design projects, which is a much more bespoke design thinking tool, but it has the same effect as a survey gathering that information. So many other things you can use these days to gather that information as well. Microsoft Forms, SurveyMonkey, all of those types of tech tools are great for getting that information. Great thing about it is you get it in a consistent form, so you can analyze it, and it's easy and it's already gathered. So surveys, an important tool to use when you're empathizing and gathering your user information. Data, not really a tool, but more of an enabler here for you to understand the user information that you're gathering. So as we talked about before, that idea of actually gathering up usage, take up, when we were talking about the surveys before, people rating their experiences, rating how long it might have taken for them to use the product or the service. And I think one of the really important things to think about here is that idea of not just making it quantitative analysis or quantitative data, but also qualitative data, because here we're talking about people's experiences. So can't necessarily put a number on that unless you put it in a range, I know, but actually gathering data where people are giving that free text information is really important, because hopefully people do, and I've seen it happen, they will actually articulate their problems or their experiences in words rather than just putting it on the scale. So as I said, two things here: look at the qualitative side of the data that you're wanting to gather, and also the quantitative side as well, and mix it up. Don't just go for one or the other. I think that you get a much better result if you can have both. And tying in again to that idea of metrics. So if you're doing this at the start of your project, you can get those baselines which you can use for your metrics as you go. The other thing that I've found when we've gathered this information in our projects is it actually starts you thinking about what your metrics can be, because people are articulating what they want improved or what the problems are. So you're actually understanding what's going to get that better result, and it helps you to frame those metrics. Okay, another tool that you can use is the empathy map, very much a design thinking tool, where you actually start to gather this particular information as well. So this is often the way that you can look at your empathy interviews and then gather your user information from your interviews. So here you're starting to collect what different users will say, what they do, what they think, and what they feel. And then you can start to see the trends and gather and start to group information, so you can start to work out where you need to put your efforts in terms of the solution that you're going to design or ideate, because you're starting to gather that information in a similar way from your different users, and you can capture it in this way. Personas is also something that's a good thing to do, because it actually humanises the whole idea and project. And I think in some ways people relate more if they can actually visualize and understand that what the user has said that they want, and you put a name and a face to it. So you start to gather that information around your users, and you can have a number of different personas. What it means is that you can actually then use that to design for different personas and make sure that you're covering the field in terms of the different needs that are required for your project. Journey mapping is also a really good way of visualizing and really taking a user-centered approach, because you're going on the journey with the user. You're actually seeing from their perspective where those pain points are. I think that's the first time I've used this that term in this talk, which is amazing, where their pain points are along that journey. Once again, what matters to them. And that can really help you to work out where you need to focus your attention on when you're proceeding with your innovation solution. So the other thing, or the other way that we can do this too, is actually bringing the users into the ideation phase of your project. Ideating is that brainstorming phase where you can, my term, come up with the crazy ideas and really do that very much divergent thinking, where you're thinking about all the possibilities. And if you've got the end users in that workshop with you, you can, really start to work with them to develop those types of ideas. I've been involved in a number of design sprints where we've done that, and it's amazing to see the eventual end users actually it starts to click with them that yes, this could be a possibility, and yes, this could work. And so workshopping those ideas is a really good way of actually bringing the user focus into the project. It doesn't have to be the crazy design sprints or even serious design sprints. It can actually be just workshops. You can just get people together and start to workshop what those ideas would look like. And importantly, that gives you the benefit of building off the ideas of others. So that's another tool that you can use. The testing and iterating phase is really important from the user-centered point of view as well, because once you've actually developed your prototype, you need to get feedback from the users or the potential users. It's a critical part of what we do when we're designing. And the way you get that feedback is you give it to your users to try out, to test, see if they can break it, hope that they can break it, because that means that you can iterate it and improve on it. So the users are very much front and center in terms of giving us that feedback, but also, as we said, to iterate it, and then we can go back and it becomes that continuous circle of, not continuous, eventually hopefully you get to a result where it doesn't have to continually be iterated, but sometimes it does, to get that user information and use it. The other important thing here too is that when we come back and talk about metrics again, as we did before, and if we've got that user information that we've had at the start of the project, we can use that as that baseline to measure if we have improved the experience for them. Have we made it more more intuitive for them? Have we made it easier for them? Is the experience better? Is it faster? Is it more efficient? Is it actually providing other benefits that we didn't even think were going to be benefits from what we've designed? So once again, metrics play a part in that part of it. So if we come back again now to the initial slide that we have, what we dreamt of at kickoff, that all the bells and whistles, what it was going to look like, jump into our solution, and then what we settled for at launch, which wasn't as good. We had to pare it back. And then we look at the user needs. If we've taken the approach that we've just gone through in terms of having the user at the center of what we've done, we hopefully could have got the result that was actually needed, which was just the bike and the ramp, rather than everything else that we've spent a lot of money and time on that really wasn't going to hit the mark with the end user. So much better result from that point of view. And And I think if we just now pull that all together when we think about it, I said at the start, one of my, or not one of, I think my personal purpose is to help to improve the experience for our clients and also for our teams and how we work together. So those people who receive our services and those people who deliver them as well. If we take a user-centered approach, be it our teams, our clients, or end users, we're much more likely to get a better result for everyone. We're going to have aligned expectations. People are going to be able to bring the skills to the projects that they need. And the result, I would say, is going to end up being a much more holistic result that actually hits the needs of the users rather than us working in silos or sending people off to get different advice or assistance from different areas. We're actually providing that in a much more user-centered way. All of these things you need to map out right from the start of your innovation project. Start off by thinking who your users are, what those problems are, what matters to your users in terms of those problems. Use empathy and collaboration and experimentation and creativity if you want to go all the way through the design type of process to actually work out what your design should look like, and then involve the users the whole way through your innovation project to get a much better result. And I have come up early, Terry, so I'm very happy to answer any questions. But what I would say is, if you want to know more about this, there are some fabulous resources out there. Centre for Legal Innovation, can't go past that. That's why I wanted you up there for this, Terry. There's the Click Legal Design and Thinking and Doing series, which was part of my distinguished fellowship that I did with the centre, which I absolutely enjoyed and involves a lot of people from the centre and our network, which was fabulous. So it's a 9-part series which actually goes through people's lived experiences of using design thinking and user-centered design. The other place that I think is really good for you to look at is the Legal Design Lab. Stanford Legal Design Lab has an amazing array of examples, especially in the access to justice side of things. Obviously, a really crucial area for us to get the user-centered design side of things right, because we're often dealing with vulnerable people in that situation. So some great examples there from Margaret Hagan and her team at the Legal Design Lab. And finally, if you would like to know more about legal design thinking and more importantly doing, then the recent book by Mira Klamola and Astrid Kohlmeyer is Doing Law in the 21st Century, the Legal Design book, is a fabulous book. It is so, I talk about user-centered design. Reading that book is a joy, and we are very proud to have contributed to the field notes in that book as well with what we've done at Hive Legal. So lots to feast on in terms of user-centered design if you want to. And that is it from me, apart from questions.
Thank you, Mel. That's fantastic, or I should say another fabulous presentation. And folks, I do also just underscore all of those resources, really fabulous resources that Mel's pulled out for you there if you're looking for some more stuff in this area. So we do have a few minutes for Q&A. So if you've got some, please feel free to drop them in that little Q&A bubble at the end of the screen. But Mel, I've got a couple for you. Mm-hmm. And in a way, they're kind of revisiting some of what you've said, but maybe trying to draw on your experience with some examples as well. Mm-hmm. The first one's around the mindset shift, because I'm with you. This is a huge one. And I know in the work that we do through the centre, not just in this area, but in every area, it just keeps coming up all the time. So how, if you're in what I'm going to call a reasonably traditional firm. If it's set in stone, really hard to move, but if you're in a reasonably traditional firm that is outward looking and does want to make a change, but they're kind of stuck, what are some of the real nitty-gritty practical things that you can kick off with just to kind of start that mindset shift around all of this stuff?
It's a really good question, Terry. And I think from my experience, it's a journey. But it is a journey. And I don't think you can expect, to go into an organization and say, right, we're going to learn all about, design thinking or user-centered design. These are the mindsets that you need. I think in my experience, it is something that you have to jump into and do, and actually you have to immerse yourself in it. This is not theoretical. It is actually the doing that brings about those changes in mindset. So what I would say is, don't go in with, that idea that you're going to do some huge project and change mindsets. You are much better off going in with doable projects, small projects that you might be able to do quickly, where people can see the benefit of this type of approach. And you can use it could just be a small process that you want to redesign, and people can see the benefit of it. And look, and I think that works a lot better, because then you start to, start small, people see the benefit, they see that change in mindset, they've had the experience of understanding how that user information can be used in a really good way, and then that can be used as prototypes to roll out to larger projects or to different areas of the firm. One of the things that I've seen from our team at Hive too is that, when we first started to use design thinking, we all sort of went, well, this is a different way of thinking. But what I love now is that the Hivesters say back to us when we're doing, well, back to me when we're doing things, is I hear them say it to each other, don't jump to a solution yet. Don't. And I'm going, yes. Yeah. It is that, yes, my job is done. No, it's sort of, it's great, because if you start to do that, and people can see the benefit of that very divergent thinking, and taking that in time to include the user in that information at the start, then it's going to be a lot easier. But don't bite off more than you can chew to start off with. That's not the way that you need to do it.
So we can't change the world with one project, right?
No, absolutely not.
So the other question, just a quick follow-up on that, is you mentioned pain points, and of course, there's pain points in a transition for particularly a more traditional law firm at every level, clients, employees, all of the users that you identified. Is it better when you're choosing that discrete project to start with to focus it on client pain points, or your internal pain points? And I truly do get that the two are often quite closely connected, if not always. But is it helpful with that? Again, just thinking that kickstart bit, is it helpful to start with the client pain points first, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think it depends on the project a lot. What we do is we will run those design sprints and user information gatherings separately to start off with, and I think it just depends on which one. But that's not to say, often we'll do the team experience brainstorm and gather that information, and then we might do the client one. Sometimes just the practicalities of having a whole lot of people in a room, even virtually, means that you can't necessarily do those big design sprints in that way. But we also have done them, so we've had the clients and the team at the same time. And I think in a way that is a really good way of doing it, because people will bounce the ideas off each other. You do have to be a little bit careful around that too, because when you're doing that mix and that co-creating, so having the separate ones is a good thing, because people are more likely to actually be more open about their pain points if they're not with others.
But I can see the combined one working as well, because you're kind of hearing it directly from the client, and also I guess you're almost both buying into the solution in a way, so that's got to help with the relationship building bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It does, especially in the ideating side of things.
Yeah,
especially when you've got that, and I think the benefit of that too is when you hear people say, you know, this is my idea, and then someone will say, oh yeah, and I can see how that would work if we use this legal technology or this technology, or I can see how that would work if we actually bring in that group from, or that business unit. So you start to, that building of ideas can really help, and people can bring their skills to the co-creating or ideating part of it.
So you've created a perfect segue to the second question that I wanted to ask you, even though I know you weren't doing it on purpose, but it's around kind of this concept of failure and experimentation, because the ideation phase, to the extent that it's tied with that aspect of failure and experimentation, I guess, is still somewhat new in legal, and also probably some of the most challenging, given I'm focusing particularly on lawyers at the moment. The way that lawyers we have been trained is almost the antithesis of that. So, you know, how do you help folks in a way, I'm going to say, get comfortable with failure and experimentation, and I guess also ultimately even a different relationship with risk management?
Yeah. It's absolutely. So, you know, one of the other blockers that we have is that the legal, I'm going to say the legal ecosystem, because I think it's not just lawyers. I think even if you're not necessarily a lawyer and you work in the legal ecosystem, you still have those pressures on you in terms of the organisations and the traditional ways of thinking, and we're skeptics. I mean, you know, as Richard, he talks about that idea of where I think we're 90th percentile for skepticism from the norm, which is crazy but understandable in terms of the type of work that we do in the legal ecosystem. To answer your question though, how do we get comfortable with experimentation? I think the way that we approach it is we say it's a safe place to think really crazily in a way, or to experiment if you're ideating, and you can come up with these really broad ideas. And the way that the comfort comes when you say, we're just spitballing here, you know, we're just experimenting, we're just thinking about what it might be. Let your mind go to those places. Let's think about all of that type of thing. And we can always bring it back in. We can always converge that thinking so that it becomes doable and comfortable for you, either as a lawyer or, you know, for the clients. We're not going to go out there with crazy ideas, but this is just your way of being more creative. So have permission to do that, and then we work out how we actually make it work and doable within the constraints of more traditional ways of thinking. And I think that as long as you don't bring the idea too far back, it still works and gives people the comfort that you're not experimenting necessarily, you're being creative and coming up with different ideas that can be brought back to the doable.
Yeah, it's a great combination of the two, and thank you for that, and thank you also for the session today, Mal. Really, really appreciate it. As I said at the beginning, really delighted to welcome you back, and thank you everyone for attending as well. Really, really nice to see you here both live, and for those of you that will pick up the recording of this as well as a webinar and as a podcast. I know that, you know, these are often sessions that need to resonate for a little while for thoughts and ideas to bubble up to the top. So I know Mel is very open to you contacting her. She's certainly readily able to be found on LinkedIn, if not the Hive Legal website. So Mel, I'll ask folks to reach out to you. I know you're fine with that. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I love talking to people about design thinking.
That's right. It is her passion, so by all means tap into it. If you're interested in more of the episodes in this series, and we have got a few more coming up over the next few weeks before the end of the year, do please follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook or Twitter, because you'll see them there, or indeed any of our events otherwise that you would like to take advantage of as well. We'd love to see you there. So again, Mal, thank you very, very much. Lovely to see you, and everyone, we'll see you at another session, I hope, very soon. Bye.
Thanks, Terry. Bye, everyone.